This is Kingdom Faith, where we talk about the Christian life, the good stuff, and the hard stuff. I have a special guest with me, my wife. Hopefully she remembers I called her a special guest. We've been married for 3 years. We've been together for what seems like an eternity now.
I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
We've been together for a long time. I don't even know how many years now. It's like 9?
Yeah, 9. Yeah. We're getting close to 10.
So we met in high school, and we're together now. So on this week's episode, we're going to talk about something that's a little bit personal for Savannah and I. I think it'd be a good episode, and I know there's probably a lot of people who probably struggle with this, who become believers and don't really know what to do. So this title of this episode is When Your Family Doesn't Believe. And both of us can relate to that in a lot of different ways, especially when I first started at this church and you first started. It was very obvious and kind of right out there. But Savannah, why don't you tell us about how you started coming to church, your testimony, your salvation piece, and then kind of how that started to change your family dynamic.
Yeah, so I grew up in a household that wasn't Christian. Most of my family isn't Christian today. I have a set of grandparents who have some background in church, but growing up, church wasn't a thing for my family. And so for me, it also wasn't a thing. My family is very driven by these ideas of the world, so it was kind of the whole grow up, be successful, go to college, get a good job, and you'll be set. Like, that's what you need to do to be happy and to live a good life. Well, then fast forward to freshman year of high school, I went to Germany. So not everyone gets to do that, but I got the chance to go to Germany and went over spring break, and our mutual friend Ben was there, and that's how I met him. And once we came back, we had kept in communication, and he invited me to come to the meal ministry. And that was kind of my first step into the church realm. It's not church, but it was kind of where I got started. And even my family's like, yeah, volunteer work, that's great. My head, I'm like, that looks good on college applications. I get to hang out with friends. So I went just because I liked volunteering. And then that soon led into going to youth group, because those were the youth meal ministry nights. So I started coming to youth group and then Sunday nights, and it just kind of continued to grow more and more and more until late 2012, I think December, but it's been a few years now. That's when I accepted Jesus. So I believe it was, it might have been a Sunday morning. I might have been going in the morning at that point. But we used to have these visitor cards, and I would mark on them. It'd be interested in salvation, interested in learning more about the church, and I would just mark those all the time because I kind of knew there was something there, but I didn't know church. So I was like, I think this is what I want. And luckily was able to get saved here at the church alongside with Pastor Jimmy. He led me through prayer and everything with that. That's kind of when the big changes started happening. I think my parents kind of thought church was more of a phase at first. Yeah. They were like, oh, she'll go, but probably not stick with it. Because they weren't against church. I mean, they gave my siblings and I the opportunity to go, try out churches. My sister, she had done the school program. I don't remember.
It was Kids Campus, I believe is what it was.
Yeah, called. I don't remember what it was. The name of it was, but a bunch of middle school kids, high school kids get together. She had done that for a couple years. I had gone with friends before. Once you do sleepovers, and if that family goes to church, it's expected you go with them. And they were always like, when you get older, you can try things out, kind of make the choice for yourself. But I think they assumed we would all be like, nah, not for us. But once it became more permanent, that's kind of when the dynamic between my family and I really started to shift. It started to become more clear that my priorities were very different. And it kind of made me feel like I was standing out because I wasn't always kind of on board with the things that I used to be on board with, which were a lot of the things they believed.
And I know, with at least when I became a Christian, and my whole drive and motivation had switched from doing things, of the world to doing, church things and youth group. And I, when Mom hardly was able to drive us places or things like that because she was working. So I would walk from, a couple miles a lot of times to the church or to the meal or whatever. Or Scott here, a deacon here, would come and pick me up. And so he'd have help to shovel the snow or to do all these things. And I remember, anytime I'd be like, well, I got church this day, or I got youth group this day, or, I'm going down to the meal that day. I remember always like, oh, you hang out with them more than you do us.
That came up a lot.
So I think that a lot of times happens to a lot of people when they're the first people in their family really to have a relationship with Christ, because your priorities do change and the dynamic definitely changes. And I know at least with your family, when we started to date or and all those things, I always felt like they felt like I was taking you away almost. When it wasn't me, it was Jesus. Because it's not like we were going on dates. We were going to church. We were at church and we're at the meal or whatever it might be. And I think that was a huge piece for me early on, at least with your side of the family, was thinking that I was not doing something right, or I guess not. I was doing something wrong in the sense that I was taking you away from a worldly lifestyle, I guess, from not drinking or not doing these quote unquote, everybody does these types things. Like I know, like when you were in college, and they would always, not, I guess pressure is probably not the right word, but say, talk about drinking. And that's just something we don't do. Yeah. Because, that's just, we both mutually agree on not drinking. And you went to Italy, and you went everywhere.
I've traveled here and there.
And I'm going to say this, but I know what you're going to say after. Is she never takes me anywhere to go to these places.
Not true.
She just leaves me behind.
That's not, I've tried. You have no interest, but these were all school related trips too, so it's a very different situation.
But you didn't even drink wine.
Yeah, in Italy. That was a big deal too. Like I would have thought that it would have been fine, that they wouldn't have cared that much, but it was like it was up there as one of the top things of like, why wouldn't you do that? Like almost like I messed up, like traveling the world. It was like, oh, you did that wrong, and I was like, I had a great time. Like I didn't need to drink the wine to experience Italy.
Or to go to these different parties in college or those types of things. And I know you even, had some things with friends and stuff like that. Probably every Christian who goes to college and doesn't, refrains from that lifestyle probably has. But I know it's a lot more difficult when it comes from your family than when it just comes from, a quote unquote friend or whatever. So I know that, when that started to change, and I know my especially for me, like my speech and things like that started to change, because I used to cuss and say very vulgar things. I remember a moment with my mom, before she was saved, I remember we got in an argument about something. I don't remember what it was. And she started yelling, and Mom was just like I was. She used some choice words here or there.
Such a nice way to put it.
And she was saying, this and this, and I know for sure that I shouldn't have handled it the way that I did. But anger tends to put you in a place where you shouldn't be. Yeah. And I remember telling Mom when we were arguing, could you please not say those words? And that was a mistake. She mentioned a lot of things of the fact that you think because you're a Christian that you're better than me or blah blah blah, and that was never the case. And I know it's not the case with your side of the family or any of that, but it's just those types of moments, I think, that you tend to wonder. It's like, man, I'm a lot different than my family. I'm a lot more different than, how they think about things, their worldview, the way that they view good things and bad things. And, Jesus tends to change your life completely upside down. And not everybody's on board with that or even happy about that. So I know there's been a lot of moments like that. But, with all these moments and the pressure to, because you want your family to, I guess, be proud of you in a sense.
Oh, of course, yeah. I think that's the biggest thing.
And to just be proud of the things, I guess, that you're doing. And you would think that church-related things like volunteering at the meal and, serving and those types of things would be like, man, you would think that would be, your family would look on you and that, okay, you're doing something good. But I know that wasn't the case. It seemed, I guess, with your family.
Yeah, at least early on. Even now, still some of it today, not so much. I don't notice it as much anymore, but that was kind of the challenging part was, I would have these things that were church related that I'd be so excited about. I mean, like being the children's church director, I think that's an amazing thing that I get to do. Like, I went to school to be a teacher, so there's that passion of just working with kids and teaching, and then I get to do that in church, and I'm super proud of it. I feel like I'm doing everything right, and it's like you share those things with your family sometimes, and it's like there's okay, and then it's like you hear it them tell your sibling tell them something else, and then they're like, oh, that's amazing, and it's like, man, where is that? You just so badly want that. Almost like approval, not that you need it, but it's like, these are good things. Why don't you think they're good either? So even sometimes it makes it hard to want to share those two with them. There's things that I'm like, I guess I'm not going to tell. I'll put it on Facebook. Maybe they'll see it there, but I'm not going to go out of my way to mention it because you almost don't want that kind of rejection type feeling to come about.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was going to say with that. Is you tend not to even talk about things. You tend not to want to, because of because you get the same response over and over again.
Yeah.
To even want to talk about what God's doing in your marriage, talk about what God's doing in your life. I know, and you were a little bit scared to even tell your parents that you're now going to be working at the church and not teaching for a lot of different reasons. And I know that was a huge piece, but just not being able to share those things with your family, the people who raised you and loved you and do those things, you start to feel distance. You start not to want to conversate as much and all those things. So, I know, for me, at least looking into yours and even part of mine, on my dad's side, the conversations seem short. You tend not to talk about very deep things anymore. Yeah,
you avoid those topics that are going to cause conflict.
Because, especially, that a lot of your ideas, the way that you think are going to be completely different. And, that's just going to stir up conflict. It's going to stir up arguments. So then you're left with, what do I do? Do I never talk to my family again? Do I only say, the things that are worldly and don't talk about the godly things? But then I think you deny a part of yourself, a part of the thing that God has done, the main part of yourself if you're a believer in Jesus Christ. When you're not able to talk about the wonderful things that He's doing in your life, it tends not to, I guess in the way that I look at it a lot of times, everything else seems minimal when you can't talk about the one main thing in your life, which is Jesus Christ. And I know that can be difficult, but, there's a lot of ways that I know it affects our family. Like I mentioned, the conversations are short. We've had heated arguments at times.
Yeah.
About lots of different things, but how do you think that it's affected our family?
I would describe it like a roller coaster. So you have those moments where things are great. You're at the top. You're like, okay, we're getting along. You kind of feel like you could invite them to church and like it might go okay. Like, you know, you feel like you can mention things a little bit more freely, and you know, like things are just good. And I feel like that's kind of really where we are right now. Like I feel like things have been really good with our family. But then there's also those downs. Like it's just a constant up and down, and like something comes up and something gets said, and because of just our beliefs being so different from our family, it's easy for them to be like, oh, well, you're only saying that because of church, or, well, you know, this isn't like how we believe, like that's not okay. And so then it just puts everything like in a very low place, and it makes communication hard, and like you kind of shut down. But then, you know, then it starts to work its way back up. So it's always changing, which can sometimes be tiring, but it's still good because it's having those good moments. Like it's really just encouraging. Like lately I've been so encouraged just where things are, having that good place where I'm like, okay, we're talking again. Like we're having these conversations. I feel like I can tell them about my job and it's going to be okay. Like I don't feel scared to tell them anymore. So yeah, but I mean, there's always still the hard things. I mean, my family in particular has a lot of, more liberal views, I guess, if you'd have to give it a label. And I have a lot of family members who identify with the LGBTQ plus. I'm sure I'm missing letters there. And just trying to navigate that as a Christian is really hard because, like, they're your family. You want to love them. But it's like trying to find that balance of loving them, but not kind of sacrificing your beliefs either, and not just being like, okay, well, when I'm around them, I'm not gonna like say these things when like that's not who I am. And luckily, like some of my family in that boat understands, and it's okay. Others, it's a little bit harder to kind of navigate that situation.
So yeah, and I know, you know, there's I'll talk about at least this moment, and you can talk about it because I think it affects you more than me. Is because you're typically the one that invites your family. You're typically the one that invites your grandparents or your mom or your dad or your sister or your brother to church. And you get the constant no. You get the constant, you know, maybe next week, or the constant, you know, just too busy, or all these different things. How do you deal with that? So if you continue to keep getting no's and I know we'll talk about it a little bit later too, with just being persistent, but it's gotta affect you in a way that's not good.
Oh yeah, I mean, you've experienced it too, where there's just days where I'm like, I don't know what else to do. Like it just kind of feels like you keep like hitting this wall, and there's days where I'm like, why do I even bother? Yeah. Like there's sometimes you just want to give up. But it's this idea that I love them so much that like I know that like, you know, there's heaven and hell, and I know that at this point, like if somehow we all died today, like I'm going to heaven, and more than likely all of my family that like I'm super close with isn't. And that's a scary thought. And like trying to convey that to them, like they don't understand that idea. So to them, it doesn't have the same weight. So when like they constantly, you know, I'm just like, why don't they understand? Like this is so important. And even just with the just regular impacts it's had in my life, I'm like, how do they not see that like God isn't a bad thing? Like it's so good. And so when they're constantly saying no, like there's a lot of times where I just want to give up because I'm like, this is getting nowhere. I was like, maybe I've just done all I can do. Like maybe somebody else needs to come in, but like I might be the only Christian that they run into like constantly. So it can be hard. That's for sure.
Yeah, and it definitely is, because I've seen it, you know, just in our own family. You know, just, and I can imagine for anybody, you know, like you said, you know that there's an eternity, and you know without Jesus Christ, you're gonna fall short, because we all fall short, and the only reason that some of us are getting into heaven and some of us aren't is because of Jesus Christ. And all that Jesus Christ does is offer the gift of salvation. It's nothing you work for, it's nothing you toil for, nothing like that. It's just, I want this. Jesus has died for it, or paid the price so that I can have it, and it's only by grace. And you so badly want your family to have that. Because not only the impact that it's done in your own life, but what it can do for eternity. And there's I always forget who it is. I think it's Spurgeon, but there's a quote, and I don't have it pulled up, but it goes something like the idea of, if I'm going to be if people are going to be rushing into hell, I need to be the one who tries to stand in the gap. I need to be the one who pulls them at the knees, or pleads with them, or begs them, or whatever it might be, so that they don't go there. And I think that's the view of anything that we do when we're talking about our family, is their eternity secure? All the other stuff falls into place. The ideas, the politics. A person doesn't change those and then come to Jesus. They come to Jesus, and then those things tend to change. I know my worldview has completely been flipped upside down. The things 100%. I used to think were okay, I know aren't okay, and the things that I thought were wrong but aren't wrong, or all these different things. And I think that's, like I said, that's the viewpoint, especially in our own family, is you want them so badly to have salvation. You pray every single day that they would come to a relationship with Jesus Christ. But then you keep getting no. And you keep getting not yet. Or you keep getting, maybe next month, or maybe next week, or all these different things. And it tends to do a toil on your body. Your spiritual body and your physical body. Because you become so exhausted, because you keep asking, and you keep getting the no's, and like you said, you just want to quit. You just want to give up. It's not worth it anymore. You hope maybe somebody else comes in, and it's so easy, I think, to say that, but then you always look back. That's my family. Yeah. And I think that's a drive, obviously, to keep going. But I know there's a lot of things that we do so that we don't quit. So we don't decide to quit. And I know I've shared a story about my mom before on this podcast, but I'll share it again, because you never know who's listening or watching. Mom got sick, and we had a mission team come up, and I had prayed for 8 years fairly consistently that Mom would come to a relationship, and I tried talking to her before about Christ and what she thought, and all those different things, and she got sick, and then this mission team come up, and there's 2 ladies who were so persistent. They're so excited, and they heard the story about my mom, because I had done a Bible study, and I had asked prayer for it when we did prayer requests, and they asked me if they could go see her, if she'd be okay with that. So I said, well, let me ask. And Mom said that she would be okay with it. And these ladies were getting ready to go, and then Mom texted me or something like that and said that she didn't want them to come over. Well, these ladies were so persistent that they said, well, if we dropped a goodie bag off or something like that, would you be okay with that? And I said, well, I know my mom. And I said, I know if you go knock on her door and you give her something, like a goodie bag, she's probably going to invite you in anyways. So I said, go ahead and do it. So she might be mad at me in the long run. But I remember they called me, and they gave me one of the greatest news I've ever heard, which is that, she had come to a relationship with Jesus. And that was a huge reassurance piece for me, not only with my own family, but then also with your family, is that if God could do something so crazy, like 2 ladies from Florida would come up, who I didn't know, and share the gospel, and that would be the moment that Mom was pulled, I know he can do that for anybody else. And I know that, I know a lot of people will say, well, God knows what I want, or God knows, the prayer. I don't have to keep saying it. And that's true to a certain point, but I think it shows how much you want it, how much you need it. When you continue to pray, and when you pray for 8 years for something, God hears every time that you pray.
Yeah.
And I know that's what we do a lot with your family, is we pray. Sometimes we pray at the altar. So I know you pray a lot on your own.
Yep.
And I pray a lot on my own for them, that they would just start thinking about God a little bit more. Not necessarily just salvation right off the bat.
Yeah.
Or just pray they'd step into the church building.
Yeah, honestly, at this point, a lot of my prayers just let them say yes to coming. Like, even something that simple, like, is a huge step. And just with, like, how long it's been and just the effort, like, just even seeing that, because, like, my parents are the type of people who are like, the church building's gonna fall down if I walk in. So it's like, if they step into the church, like, it's a big deal. So that's been a big one lately. Like, just let them say yes to coming just one time.
Yeah, and you just want to hear that for anything, not just salvation, but just for any little piece of evidence that they might be thinking about God, just a little bit more. And like I get to share, that's just an amazing testimony. Persistence is what in prayer is always an amazing testimony, and that's a huge piece. But can you think anything else that we do, what we do, to continue not to quit, to not to give up?
Yeah, I think one of them too is just continuing to invite them, even though, like, there's been so much rejection. Like, I think I invite my grandparents probably every single time that you have a preaching date. Every time it comes on the calendar, I'm like, okay. I was like, part of it's like, all right, I know that they maybe don't want to come to church, but maybe they'll come because they want to support you. So I was like, anytime your preaching dates come out, I'm like, okay, and I'll send the text messages, and I'm like, okay. And even if there's that no, I'm like, okay, next time I'm still going to do it. Because you never know, like, when that time is going to come where they're like, yeah, I'm going to. So I just constantly sending those invites through text message.
So like I said, we're going to talk about persistence. And, persistence is the key to a lot of different things for not just what, for your family to believe or those types of things. But persistence is the key for a huge amount of things in your prayer life. You need to continue to pray over and over again, for whatever it might be, whether that's healing, whether that's, financial things, whatever it might be. That's something that you need to continue to pray for, without ceasing. That's what the Bible says. So there's a story that I like a lot, and eventually I'll do a message on it. But it's just a short little story. It's in Luke 19, and it's the story about Zacchaeus. He's a tax collector, and people didn't like tax collectors. For one,
they make sure they mention that in those passages too. Yeah. Usually,
they definitely didn't like tax collectors, and I would say just about everybody now doesn't really like tax collectors either. So, tax collectors tend to get a bad rap when it comes to the Bible and how we live now. But verse 1 says, Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was wealthy. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but because he was short, he could not see over the crowd. So he ran ahead, climbed a sycamore fig tree, and to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today. So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. All the people saw this and began to mutter, He has gone to be a guest of a sinner. But Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord, Look, Lord, here now. Gotta turn the page. Here now I give half of my possessions to the poor, and if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount. Jesus said to him, Today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is the son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. So to me, that story right there is the definition of persistence.
Yep.
So Savannah, what do you think about that story and how that applies to our situation?
I just think even with that and like with him being a tax collector, at that time people are probably like they don't even deserve it, and I think it just reminds me that like everybody is worthy of salvation, even when like people like my family, where I feel like sometimes they seem so far away from it, that there's still that hope, and that as long as we continue to pray for them and kind of be that light in their life, that there's still that hope. There's still a possibility. Yeah.
And I think you use the word perfectly, and that's hope. With this story, you have Zacchaeus. He heard about who Jesus is, and I'm sure what he can do, and all those things. And he was short, is what the Bible says, and he wanted to see Jesus with everything that he had. And I know that because you don't climb up a tree for somebody you don't know who can do an amazing thing, or for hope, or for your last chance, or whatever it might be. And he climbed up this tree to just get a glimpse, and Jesus calls to him out of that tree, and he's saved. And his life has changed. We see it even in that very moment. His life has changed because he says if he's done anything wrong or all those things, he'll repay it back. He'll give back 4 times anything that he had ever taken from anybody. And Jesus says that he comes to seek and save the lost. And that's always got to be the forefront. With whatever we do in our marriage, in our relationship, that always has to be the forefront, is the hope that Jesus Christ offers, not only to our family, hopefully, somewhere down the road, we keep continuing to pray that will happen. But with whatever we do in life, that's always the forefront. That we would be like Zacchaeus and would climb the tree and, do the hard things just so that people might have a glimpse of who Jesus is. And there's another story in the Bible that I think also applies. You got a guy who can't walk, and he's got some friends. And Jesus is meeting in this home, and they put this man on a mat, and all 4 of his friends take him up to this roof and lower him down so that he can get right to Jesus. That's a huge persistence and urgency on their part. That they would go out of their way, do something that's not easy, continue to do probably something that's not easy, just so that their friend might have a healing from Christ. And I think that has to be the key to how we deal with my side of the family and also your side of the family, to those who don't believe. Because if we just give up, like you said, you might be the only Christian that they ever come in contact, the only person who ever might even talk about who Jesus is or the importance of it, or a different worldview. Because we've talked about on this podcast before the idea that we tend to just watch and listen to things that we believe anyways. So it's always good to add a Jesus perspective in all things, even to those who might not ever want to hear it, to those who deny it, to those who hate it. You have to be willing to do that. And if you give up, then you can almost just about bet, unless God does something amazing, but then that's not your testimony anymore after that point. And if you just give up, you can't expect them to ever come.
And I think what's so important with the 2 stories that you shared specifically is it shows that with this whole dynamic, that it's being persistent in prayer, but also like there's action involved. You have to seek them, to have those conversations with them, to invite them. of course, like, I mean, God can do anything. You can't limit him. So, of course, like, there's those moments where you can just pray for years and things might happen, but it also takes, like, work on our parts. Like, you having that conversation in your small group led to those ladies going, and those ladies had to, like, make that effort to go to your mom. Like, I have to make that effort to invite my family to come to church. So it really just shows that it's not just persistence in prayer, but also also through action.
Absolutely. And you can say a lot of things, you can hope a lot of things, but if you don't ever put those into action, you can just about bet that none of them will come to light. And that's a huge piece. And there are times that it's hard. There's the times that, it's like, man, it's like, I don't want to go to the family thing. And, I mentioned to a guy here at the church I think he was joking, but so if he's listened to this, know that I knew that you were probably
It was a
joking.
joke.
But it's the same idea, and I know people think this way, is, man, I don't really want to go to my mother-in-law's house. I don't really want to go to this holiday thing or this family thing. And I thought that in the beginning. And, I was like, we don't think the same things. They talk about different things. It's like, I just don't really want to go. And there was a moment, I never expected it, where your grandmother asked me to pray. Family that doesn't pray.
Yeah.
Most of them don't believe in God at all.
I was shocked. I couldn't believe it.
But they asked me to pray, and, I prayed and got to share the gospel in the prayer like I typically always do. Because that's the key, the hope of all those times I pray at the holiday things is that someone might ask me a question, why do you go to church? Why do you believe this? Why? See, that's the thing, they don't even tend to want to ask those questions yet, but I know there will be a moment where those questions come up. Why do you every Sunday do you go?
Yeah.
We've seen you for years now go, and we thought you would give up. We did. We thought you would start to slack and not go anymore and do this. 'Cause I'm sure that's what they had thought at first. So why do you do it? Why is it so important? Why do you believe the Bible is true? Why do you believe Jesus? If you believe in Jesus, you'll be saved and you'll go to this thing called heaven. What's up with heaven?
Yeah.
Now, these are the questions I want to be asked because I'll always point to how Jesus has radically changed the world and radically changed my own life. And that's what I hope, but that's what I mentioned to this guy is the fact that I said, don't say that. I said, because you just might miss out on a huge opportunity to share the gospel at these things. And then I told him that story or whatever. But those are, that's a huge piece. And I know there's been a lot of other things. And I know you have some of them written down. But I know, like, that is a huge blessing for myself, at least, when it comes to your side, to be able to, at Thanksgiving pray or Christmas or whatever holiday it is.
Yeah.
That I would get to just talk to God in front of everybody. Like, that's just a blessing to me.
Yeah, this topic is such a hard one. And even I was like a little like, I don't know about this, but it's like, it's so easy to make it so doom and gloom. But like, there's those small glimmers of hope, like you said, with getting asked to pray at these family functions. Like when my grandma asked you, I don't even think I was there. Like, I'm pretty sure she asked you when I was doing something else. So I didn't even know about it until you were going to pray. And it just, like, I literally stood there just kind of shocked for a second because I was like, I never in a million years would have dreamed that would happen. And then I was like, oh, maybe it's just a one-time thing because, like, they know that you're a pastor now. But, like, even this year, they asked for Thanksgiving and Christmas, and it's just, like, those moments, or even we've gotten into disc golf. I don't know if you talk about disc golf on this podcast
really
at all, but, I mean, we play all the time, and my dad's super big into it. So we've gotten to spend more time with him and talk to him about, like, tournament stuff, and with our ministries, he even talked to us about the idea of the winter tournaments are often, like, charity-based, and he was like, well, how about we do ours for your guys' meal ministry? And it's like, it's not quite the church, but it's the step in that right direction where, if it had been a couple years ago, I don't know, it might have happened, but I feel like the chances would have been smaller. But seeing him kind of taking that interest in being we're gonna do this thing, and let's do it to help something that you guys are passionate about, really just shows me that it's paying off a little bit. It's giving those little moments of God being hey, all your time in prayer, all those invites, it's worth it. Because you can hit those moments where you're I don't know, God, are you sure you want me to send them another invite? But
yeah, because then there's moments where you feel like you're almost being too pushy.
Yeah, you're they're probably sick of me texting them.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, in my own personal opinion. They might not think that, obviously. But I think that's a huge piece, because I believe that there'll be a moment where they at least think, if you had stopped, if you stop inviting them, however many times that you invite them. There'll be a moment of thinking, because I do it all the time. I sure miss those messages, even though I never went or cared about what it was. I don't get those anymore, or anything like that. And I do think there'll be a moment, if that were to ever stop, that they would at least think about, oh wait, I haven't been invited to Savannah's church and forever, or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I think the biggest one for me too was last year. This kind of lit that fire again, where I was okay, I can do this. I had invited my grandparents. You were preaching. I don't know what month. I couldn't tell you. I just know it was last year. And I sent them a text, and I was hey, I'm pretty sure I was I know I text you guys a lot about this, but Phil's preaching this day, church starts at this time, we would love to have you come. I think it would mean a lot to Phil if you guys were there. And they actually came. And when she texted me that they would think about it, I was okay, but I kind of was they'll probably not come. But then she started being what should I wear? Does it matter? And I was oh no, you can dress in jeans if you want, be as comfortable as you want. And then I assumed it was just gonna be my grandma. She had come for your ordination and stuff, but my grandpa hadn't, and so I was it's probably just gonna be my grandma, but that was still a big deal. But then that morning, her and my grandpa came, and honestly, probably one of the best days of my life. I was so excited. I remember telling you the whole my whole worship experience was even so much better that day. I just I don't know. I just felt so so much joy and excitement for them being there, and I was yes. I was finally they're here. And it was one of those you could kind of tell they felt a little bit out of place, because it's different, and there's songs that they don't know necessarily, but just having them there and getting to sit beside them was such an amazing experience, because you see all the other families in church that get to do that, and you're man.
And that's exactly what I was going to say about that. There's just something missing a lot of times when you don't have your family beside you in church.
Yeah.
You feel alone. You feel like you're the only one. And then when your family does come, there's just something about it that fuels your worship, or fuels your desire for God, even just a little bit more, that extra push. And I think that a lot of people don't understand that, not to any other fault of their own. Because, if they have family, that's awesome. That's what you want, to have your whole family. You don't want anybody not to be there. But then those who are by themselves, who maybe it's that teenager, just sitting there with the youth group, or whatever it might be, or the 20-year-old, or the 30-year-old, or even a 50-year-old, who's all by themselves. They're the only believer in their family, and they feel all alone. And I think the important thing to know is, hopefully, if maybe you're one of those people, At least the one way that I was able to do that is know that God was always with me.
Yep.
That it didn't matter if my family wasn't there or whoever, that God was always going to be with me. And, I got to walk a lot, here in town, back and forth to church. And I always wondered, what it would be like if my family were to come, not only for the immediate benefit of not
having to walk,
but the joy of the love that the church gave me, and how much it made me feel like a part of a family, how much more that, my family could feel that same thing, and that you'd be a family, because you are a family no matter what anybody believes. You're still family, and you still love them, you still care for them. But to get to come to one mind and one accord like you do with the church about Christ is a whole nother dynamic. It's a whole nother blessing. And I think maybe we take for granted a lot of times in the church, those who have their families here, just how much of a blessing God has allowed you to have in the church that not everybody partakes in. But just to know that, when you got your mom or your dad and your brothers and sisters there, know that there's no greater place that they could be than right in the church house with you. And there's no better place that you could ever be than in the church house. But like I said, I know there's moments where it's hard, and we keep working it. We keep toiling the ground. We keep laboring, like what the Bible says. And we try our best not to give up. Now, there's definitely moments where it's like, man, like you said, do we even invite them this week?
Yeah.
Does it even matter? Would they even listen? Because they are very much like people who would say the church would catch on fire. And I had a guy here in church told me the funniest thing I thought that he told somebody when they said that to them is that we have fire extinguishers.
Yeah, I should try that one sometime. I never heard that before.
Yeah, because we do have fire extinguishers.
We do.
So we'll be able to put you
We're
out.
prepared.
Yeah.
I mean, or if anything, maybe we'll get a good insurance claim. Then we can fix all the other problems that are going on.
So, what I guess is my final thought for this whole episode, because this is a personal episode, but I know there's some people who are dealing with the same things, thinking about the same things. Maybe you have, your husband and your kids, but your dad isn't here. Or your mom's not here, or your siblings. Maybe you haven't talked to them in years because, if you talk to them, they're going to be, they just won't ever want to hear from you because you believe in God or you go to church or all those things. So my final thought would be that God is doing more than what you can see. God is always doing more than what we can see. And we have to know that because when you do know that and when you understand that He's doing more than what you can see, you tend to rely on Him just a little bit more. You tend to trust Him just a little bit more with whatever situation you have. You tend to become more content about what's going on. Those times where they laugh at the things that you believe in or think they're stupid or all those things tend not to hurt as much when you understand that God's doing more than what you can see.
Yeah.
So Savannah, what would your final thoughts be for this episode?
I think we've said it multiple times. It's so easy to sometimes get discouraged when it comes to your family because you love them just so much. So it takes more of a toll on you than maybe just the person down the street. But I think taking the moment to just sit down and kind of see, okay, what has God done so far? Like when we were just talking about this episode, I told you, I said, at first I was like, it's going to be a lot of negative things. I was like, and I don't want it to be, but like, I just feel like it's going to lean more that way. And then I started thinking about it and I was like, man, like there have been so many moments, like just those little glimmers that God has provided being like, hey, like what you're doing is worth it. To like still to just give you that hope. So I feel like if you're really feeling discouraged, just like take a moment to sit down and think, okay, where were we 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago? Like what has happened? Like what has God done in that time in that relationship? Because you'll start to see just like the way that God moves, that He's probably done these little things here and there that you maybe missed, but were those little moments of like, hey, like it's starting to work, and like it's still going to take some time, but like keep going. And I think that will really help you just continue to keep pushing forward and to keep asking and to keep praying, even when it might seem hopeless in the moment.
Absolutely. So our weekly verse is Revelation 3:20, which says, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in to him and eat with him, and he with me." Amazing verse. So that ends our episode for this week. If you'd like to like and subscribe this episode, if you like this episode, you can share it on Facebook, wherever it might be. That would be a huge blessing to us. If you'd like to leave a comment or a request, you can do that down below in the video, or you can email us at kingdomfaith2001@gmail.com. And thank you for listening to Kingdom Faith. You gotta say adios.
Do I?
Yeah, that's what Phil does.
I'm not Phil, sorry.
Say adios.
Bye.